We're back again today with another IELTS speaking part 2 practice. Our example today is to describe a person much older than you who you admire. You should say who this person is, how you know this person, how this person influenced you, and explain why you admire this person.
So today I would like to describe one gentleman that I knew. He is not only my friend, but he also my teacher in the real life.
Okay, so this student is talking about a friend who she says is not just her friend. She says also my teacher in the real life. I might just change this to my teacher in life or my teacher in the real world, just to make it sound a little more natural. Oh, and one more thing. She said he also my teacher. So we just need to add that is back in there. He is also my teacher, just to improve our grammar score. It is extremely common for students to omit the word is from time to time. It's completely normal. When people get nervous, that's what happens.
He has a great influence on me and I always respect him. His name is Huy and he will turn to 70 years old next year, as I remember.
Okay, so she says he has a great influence on her, very good, and that she always respects him. Right? She gives his name. She says he will turn to 70 years old. So I would just suggest a small change there. Now we will say he will turn 70 years old next year, or he will turn 70 next year.
I first met him since 2 years ago when I moved to his house.
Great. So this is a very good example of what I hear a lot when I am practicing with my students. So she said, I first met him since 2 years ago. So this is very common. My students will say something like this a lot. English is a little crazy that we have some very special rules about time or when things happen. So I would change it to, I first met him 2 years ago. Or she could say something like, I've known him since 2018. All right, so I'll give some more examples here. You could say, I've known him for 2 years. Or, I met him 2 years ago. I met him in 2018. Or, I've known him since 2018.
He is my owner, but he was so kind with me.
Okay, great. So she explains how she met this gentleman. She said when she moved to his house, I would just be careful with that final sound there, just to make house, the S sound, a bit stronger. And she said, he's my owner. I think she's meaning that he's the owner of the house, or maybe her landlord. So I would change that to he was my landlord, or he was the owner of my house. That will just sound more natural.
A bit taller than me, but his personality is exactly the same with my father.
Alright, so she says he's a little bit taller than me. And the way she says it sounds a little like a question. So maybe she's not sure that he's taller. If she's not sure, maybe we leave that out. I don't think she has to put that in there. But I do like this next part. She says his personality is just like her dad's. That he's intelligent, easygoing, like her dad. So she says his personality is exactly the same with my father. Just to make it sound a bit more natural, we could change it to exactly the same as my father.
He is intelligent, easygoing, and take care for everything in the house.
She says that, like my father, take care for everything in the house. we change it to he takes care of everything in the house. That would be great.
That had two things he were impressed me a lot. First of all, he's the person respect the woman, and he would teach me how to love people, how to let them respect me. He might not a rich guy, but he is the person who understands how to deal with the people. And it's my first time I can feel that this man have the wonderful heart. If they have any bad situation happen, he will think the positive way. And from that, I learned a lot.
Okay, so she does have some longer pauses here, which is totally normal when you're thinking about what to say next. Okay, he will teach me how to love people, how to let them respect me. That's nice. She says he's not rich, but he's someone who understands how to deal with people. Okay. So she mentions that he will think the positive way about things. Another way to describe that could be he sees the bright side of things. That would just make her sentence sound just a little bit more natural. One note, she does say the words bad situation a couple times, so she could change that to problems with friends, just to mix up the vocabulary a bit. All right.
Anytime I have any question, if I have like the bad situation with my friend, he's always the first person I'm asking for the advice. And he was patient to teach me, and I really appreciate. And secondly, he's the person have belief. Me and him are the Christian. We believe in Jesus, but I am kind of lazy to go to the church. But he's so kind. Every Sunday after he went to the church, and he always like transfer the lesson from the Jesus to me, and day by day he created the belief in my heart.
Okay, great. So she says, I'm kind of lazy to go to church. So again, just a small thing. I am too lazy to go, just to put that am back in there.
I really like him, and he teach me more and more lesson in the life. I wish I can call him father one day.
So yes, in general, I would say this person definitely picked a good subject for her topic because she has lots to say about them. So for this fluency, I would suggest practicing the same topic again and trying to hit the main points a little bit faster. If we can reduce the longer pauses and just pick out the most important information. She actually has more than enough information, so we can reduce that to help her fit within the 2-minute limit. For vocabulary, just keeping an eye on phrases that might be repeated more than once. She could look at some other alternatives. Just for instance, things like talking about problems or issues. There are different ways to say that. With grammar, just keeping an eye on not forgetting things like is or am. That's quite important for the grammar part of the test. And with pronunciation, the key words I would love the student just to keep in mind. Firstly, admire. So just being careful that it doesn't sound like admire. So admire with that I sound is quite important. Also, there are a few words in there that I thought were just a bit difficult to hear. So the word Christian. We just want to be careful that it doesn't sound like Tristan. So just that beginning CH sound. Also, a couple words like Jesus and church. Just that final CH sound at the end, the church, is quite important. So things like this, she can, I think, improve quite quickly. So well done. You actually said more than you needed to. So keep practicing, and I know you can reach that 2-minute mark. So don't forget, please keep submitting your practice IELTS speaking part 2 questions. We love getting real examples of real questions from real students, but getting quick because we will select the first 2 submissions we receive every month.